The ultimatum. The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a sound that echoed through the enormous hall. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked forward, her footsteps clicking on the polished floor. Above her head, a dome made of transparent metal showed the stars outside. Around her, seated in a giant circle that rose up like a stadium, were the representatives of 47 alien species. Elena had seen many impressive things in her life, but this place still made her feel small. Each species had their own section, their own strange architecture built into the walls. Some aliens breathed different air, so they sat behind special barriers. Others were so large they needed reinforced platforms. A few were so small that Elena needed her visual enhancers to see them properly. She reached the center of the chamber where a single platform waited for her. This was humanity's spot. They had only been given it 3 months ago after 50 years of faster-than-light travel and expansion into the galaxy. 50 years. Elena knew that for most of these species, 50 years was nothing. Some of them had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Ambassador Vasquez of Earth. A booming voice filled the chamber. It came from everywhere at once, translated automatically into every language. You have been summoned to hear the judgment of this council. Elena looked up at the speaker. It was Krenzoth, the supreme commander of the Korthax Dominion. His species looked like enormous reptiles, with scales that shimmered in shades of deep blue and green. He was easily 3 meters tall, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire. Behind him sat dozens more of his kind, all watching her with cold calculation. This council has reviewed the expansion of your species, Krenzoth continued. His mouth didn't move, but the translator made his words sound harsh and final. In 50 of your years, you have claimed 32 star systems. You have established colonies on 48 worlds. You have extracted resources without permission from neutral zones. Your military fleet has grown to numbers that concern us. Elena kept her face neutral. She had expected this. Humanity's expansion had been aggressive by galactic standards. But by human standards, it had been careful and measured. The Council has reached a decision, another voice joined in. This one belonged to Zixtar Prime, the hive queen of the insectoid collective. Her species looked like massive mantises made of living crystal. Humanity must reduce its presence in this galaxy. You will surrender control of 26 of your 32 systems. You will reduce your military vessels by 80%. You will accept supervisors from elder species to oversee your remaining colonies. The chamber filled with clicking sounds from the Zixtar delegation. Elena recognized it as their version of approval. Furthermore, Krenzoth stood up, making himself even more imposing. You will pay reparations to the Council for your aggressive expansion. The amount will be determined by an economic committee, but it will take your species approximately 200 years to complete payment. Elena let the words hang in the air for a moment. Around the chamber, she could see other species watching. Some looked satisfied, others seemed uncomfortable. A few smaller species looked down at their seats, avoiding eye contact with anyone. And if we refuse? Elena asked. Her voice was calm, almost curious. The chamber erupted in noise. Various species made sounds of shock, anger, or what Elena guessed was amusement. Krenzoth raised one massive clawed hand and silence fell immediately. If you refuse, he said slowly, then this council will be forced to take military action. We have assembled a coalition fleet of 10,000 warships from 17 species. We have the manufacturing capacity to build 10,000 more within a standard year. Your entire species numbers perhaps 20 billion across your scattered worlds. We represent over 4 trillion beings. Holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showing massive fleets of alien warships. They were impressive, Elena had to admit. Sleek vessels that looked like they had been designed by artists as much as engineers. Ships that gleamed with energy shields and bristled with weapons she couldn't identify. You are new to the galactic community, a softer voice spoke. This came from Ambassador Therine of the Melodic Concordance, a species that looked like floating jellyfish made of light. Please understand, we do not wish to harm you. But there must be order. There must be rules. Every species that has come before you has learned to accept their place. In time, you will be welcomed as equals. But that time is not now. Elena nodded slowly. She pulled out a small data device from her jacket pocket. I need to transmit your demands to my government. They will need to discuss this and provide a response. You have 72 of your hours, Krenzoth declared. After that time, we will assume you have chosen conflict. The Council will act accordingly. Understood, Elena said. She pressed a button on her device and a beam of light shot upward, connecting to a human communication satellite in orbit around the station. The data would be compressed, encrypted, and sent through a series of quantum relays reaching Earth in approximately 30 minutes. The meeting was declared over. As Elena turned to leave, she caught the eye of one of the smaller species representatives. He was from a race called the Pixen, small furry creatures that looked almost like Earth's rabbits. He looked sad, and he mouthed something that her translator picked up. "I'm sorry." Elena gave him a tiny nod, then walked out of the chamber with her head held high. Behind her, the council members began to talk among themselves. Their voices mixed together into a chaos of languages and sounds, but the translation algorithms picked out fragments. "They will surrender, of course," someone said. "All new species do. They see our numbers and they understand reality. I almost feel bad for them. They seemed so proud. Pride is a luxury only the strong can afford." Krenzoth remained silent, watching the doors where the human had disappeared. Something about her calm demeanor bothered him. In his 300 years of service to the council, he had delivered ultimatums to 7 different species. They all reacted the same way: fear, anger, desperation, sometimes even bargaining on the spot. But this human had shown none of that. She had simply asked her question, received her answer, and left, like she had been expecting this whole conversation. "Supreme Commander," one of his subordinates approached. "Your thoughts?" "I think," Krenzoth said slowly, "that we should be prepared for anything. Mobilize the first wave of the fleet. Position them at the edge of human space. If they refuse, I want to be able to strike within hours, not days." "Do you think they'll refuse?" Krenzoth's eyes glowed brighter. "I don't know, and that concerns me." 3 light years away, on a small observation station that the council maintained near human territory, a technician noticed something odd. Human communications traffic had suddenly increased by a factor of 10. Military channels were lighting up. Civilian networks were buzzing with activity. He reported it to his superior, who dismissed it as panic. "They just learned they're about to lose everything," the superior said. "Of course they're talking more. They're scared." But if the technician had been able to decode and translate the actual content of those messages, he would have heard something very different from fear. He would have heard jokes, memes, references to ancient human battles where tiny forces had held off massive armies. He would have heard recruitment offices reporting lines around the block. He would have heard factory managers calculating how fast they could retool for wartime production. And he would have heard one phrase, repeated over and over across 100 worlds: "They actually threatened us? Oh, this is going to be fun." Terra's response. The emergency session of Earth's United Government convened exactly 42 minutes after Ambassador Vasquez's message arrived. In a massive underground facility beneath the Swiss Alps, representatives from every nation and colony met in person. This was too important for virtual attendance. Chancellor Maria Santos called the meeting to order. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice carried authority that made everyone listen. "You've all read the Council's demands," she said. "We have less than 3 days to respond. The floor is open." The room exploded with voices. Anger was the primary emotion, but there was something else mixed in. Something that surprised the few alien observers who were monitoring human communications. The humans were laughing. 26 systems? They want 26 of our systems? The representative from Mars Colony was a large man with a red face. "We bled for those worlds. People died terraforming those rocks, and they want us to just hand them over?" "The reparations are insulting," added the finance minister. 200 years of payments. Our entire economic model would collapse. "Let them try to take it," someone shouted from the back. "Order!" Santos slammed her hand on the table. "This is not a joke. They have 10,000 warships. Our entire fleet is maybe 800 ships, and half of those are patrol vessels and transports. Then we build more," the representative from Luna said simply. Fleet Admiral James Chen had been sitting quietly, watching the display. He was a thin man in his 60s, with short black hair going white at the temples. He had spent 40 years in the military, and his face showed the weight of every decision he had made. Now he stood up and the room fell silent. "May I?" he asked Santos. She nodded and sat down. Chen walked to the center of the room where a holographic projector waited. He activated it with a gesture, and the image of the Galactic Council chamber appeared, showing the moment when Krenzoth had displayed his fleet. 10,000 ships, Chen said quietly. 17 species. Thousands of years of spacefaring experience. They think this will frighten us into surrender. He changed the image. Now it showed something different. Statistics, numbers, charts. This is what they don't know, Chen continued. For the past 30 years since our first contact with the galactic community, we have been preparing. Not because we wanted war, but because we studied history. Our history. The image changed again, showing historical footage from Earth. Ancient battles, modern conflicts. Every time a new civilization met an established power, the same pattern emerged. The established power would try to control or eliminate the newcomer. We knew this would happen eventually, so we prepared. We've been mapping their territories. Chen pulled up a star chart that made several representatives gasp. It showed the entire Galactic Council's space with detailed notes on every major military installation, shipyard, and supply depot. We've been studying their tactics by reviewing their historical conflicts. And we found something interesting. Chen zoomed in on a battle recording from a war between two council species 50 years ago. The ships moved in careful formations, firing at each other from distance, following what looked like predetermined patterns. They fight with honor, Chen said. They have rules. They broadcast challenges before attacking. They avoid targeting certain ship sections. They give enemies time to surrender. They treat war like a sport with referees. He turned to face the assembly. We don't fight like that. We never have. When humanity goes to war, we fight to win by any means necessary. We target supply lines. We use deception. We attack where we're not expected. We don't care about honor, we care about victory. The room was completely silent now. Do we have a chance? Santos asked. At winning a conventional war? No, Chen said honestly. At making them regret ever threatening us? Yes. At making the cost so high that they beg for peace? Absolutely. What do you need? Santos asked. Time, resources, and permission to activate Protocol Thermopylae. Several representatives looked confused, but the older members, those who had been in government for decades, went pale. Protocol Thermopylae was a plan that had been developed in secret, named after an ancient Earth battle where a small force held off a massive army. It was a plan for asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale. You understand what you're asking, Santos said quietly. That protocol assumes we'll lose colonies, that people will die, that we'll have to fight a guerrilla war in space. I understand, Chen said. I also understand that if we surrender now, we'll be slaves forever. The Council will control our expansion, our economy, our future. Our children will grow up as second-class citizens in our own galaxy. I would rather fight and die than accept that. The vote was unanimous. Earth would reject the Council's demands. While the government prepared the official response, something else was happening across human space. The message had leaked, as messages always do. Within hours, every colony knew what the Council had demanded. Within a day, the response was spreading across the datanet. Memes appeared first. Humans had always used humor to deal with fear, and this was no different. Pictures of historical figures with captions like, "They want our worlds? Come and get them." Videos of ancient movie scenes where outnumbered heroes faced impossible odds, edited to show humans facing aliens. The phrase, "hold my beer," appeared in 1,000 different contexts, but behind the jokes, something serious was happening. Recruitment offices reported lines of volunteers wrapping around buildings. Factories began retooling for wartime production without waiting for official orders. Colonies that had been civilian settlements started digging bunkers and setting up defensive positions. Scientists shared weapons designs on open networks, crowdsourcing improvements. The Council's observers noticed the increased activity, but they misunderstood it. They thought they were seeing panic and chaos. They didn't realize they were seeing mobilization. Ambassador Vasquez received her instructions and returned to the Council chamber. This time she walked in with her head held even higher. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent additional observers, wanting to witness humanity's surrender. Krenzoth stood waiting. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, "has your government reached a decision?" "They have," Elena said. She pulled out a small data chip and held it up. "This contains our official response." She inserted it into the chamber's main terminal. A holographic projection appeared above her head, showing the seal of Earth's united government. Then, in text large enough for every species to read in their own language, the message appeared. The Galactic Council's demands are rejected in their entirety. Humanity will not surrender our systems, will not reduce our military, will not accept oversight, and will not pay reparations. Our colonies are our own. We claimed them fairly, harmed no one in doing so, and will not give them up. If the Council wishes to take them by force, they are welcome to try. We do not seek war, but we will not run from it. Come and take them if you dare. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species were shouting in anger, others in shock. A few of the smaller species were actually cheering, though they tried to hide it. Krenzoth's eyes blazed. You doom your species with this arrogance. Elena smiled for the first time. It was not a nice smile. Perhaps you've just made the worst mistake of your very long life. I guess we'll find out. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, Krenzoth was already giving orders to his fleet commanders. The invasion would begin immediately. On Earth, Admiral Chen received confirmation that the message had been delivered. He turned to his staff and said quietly, "All ships to their positions. Activate all defensive protocols. Send the word to every colony. Hold the line. Make them bleed for every meter." The war had begun. First contact, Military Edition. The Council fleet arrived at Proxima Centauri exactly 4 days after humanity's rejection. It was humanity's closest colony to Earth, a system with 3 habitable planets and extensive mining operations in the asteroid belt. The fleet commander was Admiral Krenzoth himself, who had brought 2,000 warships for what he expected to be a quick demonstration of power. His command ship, the Eternal Glory, was a massive vessel 3 kilometers long. Its hull was covered in ornate decorations that told the story of the Korthax Dominion's military victories over the past 1,000 years. Soon, Krenzoth thought, they would add a new panel showing the defeat of humanity. "Scan the system," he ordered. His sensor officer, a younger Korthax named Thelnoth, worked quickly at his station. After a moment, he looked up with confusion on his scaled face. "Admiral, I'm not detecting any human ships." "None?" "None, sir. The orbital stations appear to be operational, but they're on low power. There are life signs on all 3 planets, but no military presence that I can detect." Krenzoth leaned back in his command chair. This was unexpected. He had thought the humans would at least try to defend their closest colony. Perhaps they had already evacuated, or perhaps this was some kind of trap. "Send scouts forward," he ordered. "I want detailed scans of every moon, asteroid, and planet. If the humans are hiding, find them." 6 fast scout ships moved ahead of the main fleet, their sensors operating at maximum power. They found nothing. The human colonies appeared to be going about their normal business. Factories were running. Transport ships moved between planets. Everything seemed normal except for the absence of any military vessels. Perhaps they truly have no stomach for this fight, Thelnoth suggested. Krenzoth wasn't convinced, but he had a schedule to maintain. The Council wanted these systems secured within 1 standard week. Move the fleet to orbital positions around each planet. Begin landing troops. If the humans want to surrender, we'll accept it. If they want to resist on the ground, we'll deal with that too. The fleet began to move deeper into the system in formation. It was a beautiful sight, 2,000 ships moving together like a school of fish, their energy shields creating a glow that could be seen across light years. They passed the orbit of the system's outer gas giant. They passed the asteroid belt. That's when everything went wrong. The asteroid belt came alive. What had looked like ordinary rocks suddenly lit up with engine signatures. Hundreds of small craft emerged from hiding spots they had been holding for days. They were crude-looking things, barely more than engines strapped to missile racks, but they were fast and they were everywhere. "Incoming fire!" Thelnoth shouted. Missiles streaked toward the Council fleet from every direction. The larger warships activated their point defense systems, shooting down most of the incoming weapons. But there were so many missiles that some got through. One destroyer took a direct hit to its bridge, killing everyone inside. A cruiser lost its engines. A supply ship simply exploded. "Return fire." Krenzoth ordered, "Destroy those attack craft." But the human ships didn't stay still long enough to be targeted. They fired their missiles and then retreated back into the asteroid field at speeds that seemed reckless. Several crashed into asteroids and were destroyed, but the rest vanished among the rocks where the larger Council ships couldn't safely follow. "Damage report." Krenzoth demanded. 7 ships destroyed, 14 damaged. Thelnoth said. Nothing critical to our overall force strength, but sir, those missiles weren't like anything in our database. They appeared to be asteroids until they activated. Some of them are still out there drifting, and we can't tell which rocks are bombs and which are just rocks. Krenzoth snarled. Continue forward. We still outnumber them tremendously. But the surprises weren't over. As the fleet approached the inner planets, the orbital stations that had seemed dormant suddenly powered up. Weapons that had been hidden behind fake hull plating opened fire. These weren't military stations, they were supposed to be civilian research facilities and trading posts, but they fought like warships. More losses. More damage. And still no sign of the human military fleet. Where are their warships? Krenzoth demanded. They must have ships somewhere. He got his answer an hour later when the human fleet finally appeared. They came from behind the system's star, where the Council's sensors had been blinded by radiation. 200 human vessels, larger and more heavily armed than the attack craft from the asteroid belt. But they didn't attack. They just sat there, positioned between the Council fleet and the inner planets, waiting. They're giving us a chance to reconsider, Thelnoth said. That's honorable of them. Honorable or stupid, Krenzoth replied. All ships, battle formation. We'll sweep them aside and be done with this. The Council fleet reorganized into their standard attack pattern. It was a formation that had won 1,000 battles. A careful arrangement that maximized firepower while minimizing vulnerability. They began their advance following the protocols of civilized warfare. The human fleet responded by scattering. Ships broke formation and fled in every direction, which made no sense. You couldn't win a battle by running away from it. The Council ships gave chase, breaking into smaller groups to pursue different human vessels. That's when the trap revealed itself completely. The human ships weren't running. They were leading the Council vessels into carefully prepared kill zones. More hidden weapons emerged from places the Council hadn't even thought to look. Missiles came from beneath planetary surfaces, launched from silos that had been disguised as mining equipment. Drones that had been drifting like space debris suddenly activated, slamming into Council ships at tremendous speeds. One human frigate, damaged and seemingly fleeing, suddenly reversed course and rammed a Council dreadnought at full speed, destroying both vessels. And then the real horror began. A computer virus spread through the Council fleet's communication network. It was disguised as normal traffic, hidden in the automated identification signals that ships use to avoid colliding with each other. By the time the Council's cybersecurity officers detected it, the virus had infected over 300 ships. Communications went haywire. Ships received contradictory orders. Targeting systems locked onto friendly vessels. One supply convoy received navigation data that sent them straight into a planet's atmosphere, where they burned up before anyone realized the mistake. Shut down the network. Krenzoth ordered. All ships return to local communications only. But damage had been done. 3 of his supply fleets had vanished completely, either captured or destroyed, he couldn't tell which. His fuel reserves were suddenly uncertain. His ammunition counts were wrong because the infected computers had been giving false reports. The battle continued for 6 more hours. The Council fleet won, technically. They drove off the human warships and established orbital control around 2 of the 3 planets. But the cost had been staggering. 240 ships destroyed, 300 more damaged, supply lines disrupted, and they still hadn't landed any troops because the humans had mined every potential landing zone. Krenzoth sat in his command chair, staring at the casualty reports. This was supposed to have been easy, a show of force, a quick victory. Instead, it had been a nightmare. Sir? Thelnoth approached carefully. We're receiving a transmission from the 3rd planet. It's on all frequencies, broadcasting to the entire system. Put it on screen. A human appeared on the view screen. It was a military officer, judging by the uniform, but he looked completely relaxed. He was even smiling. Behind him, Krenzoth could see other humans working at computer terminals, completely calm despite the battle that had just occurred in orbit above their heads. Greetings, Admiral Krenzoth, the human said in perfect Korthax language. I am Colonel Marcus Webb, commanding the defense of Proxima Centauri 3. I wanted to personally thank you for the demonstration. We learned a lot about your tactics today. We'll do better next time. Surrender now, Krenzoth growled, and I will show mercy. Colonel Webb's smile widened. Mercy? Admiral, you just lost more ships taking one system than you've lost in your last 10 wars combined. And this is just our first colony. We have 31 more. Do the math. By the time you fight your way to Earth, you won't have a fleet left. We will crush you, Krenzoth said. Maybe, Webb replied. Or maybe you'll learn what humans learned a long time ago. There's no honor in war. There's only winning and losing. We learned that the hard way, fighting ourselves for thousands of years. You've been fighting civilized wars against civilized opponents. You have no idea what you've started here. The transmission ended. Krenzoth looked at his casualty reports again. The human was right about the numbers. At this rate, taking all of human space would cost tens of thousands of ships. The Council had those numbers, but could they afford the cost? For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Krenzoth felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. The long game 6 months after the war began, Admiral Krenzoth stood in his private quarters aboard the Eternal Glory, staring at a holographic map of human space. Red markers showed the 12 systems the Council now controlled. Blue markers showed the 20 systems that remained in human hands. But the colors were misleading. The Council didn't really control anything. The door chimed. Enter, Krenzoth said. Thelnoth came in looking exhausted. Like everyone on the ship, he hadn't slept properly in weeks. The latest report from Tau Ceti, sir. The attacks are getting worse. Krenzoth pulled up the report and read it with growing frustration. Tau Ceti had been one of the first systems they captured after Proxima Centauri. The human defenders had retreated after a brief fight, and the Council had established a garrison. That was 4 months ago. The nightmare had started immediately. Human civilians had turned into fighters overnight. They used improvised explosives hidden in shipments of food. They sabotaged water treatment facilities. They hacked into the garrison's computer systems and blasted ancient Earth music at full volume at random times, denying the soldiers sleep. They spread false rumors that caused panic. They poisoned the troops' food supplies, not enough to kill, but enough to make everyone sick. How many casualties this week? Krenzoth asked. 43 dead, over 100 injured, Thelnoth replied. And that's just at Tau Ceti. If we count all 12 occupied systems, we're losing more than 200 soldiers per week. Not to military action, to insurgents. To civilians who we're supposed to be protecting. Protecting from what? Krenzoth laughed bitterly. They don't want our protection. They want us dead. It was true. The Council had never developed proper doctrine for occupation because they had never needed it. When the Council defeated a species in war, that species surrendered properly and accepted peace terms. That's how civilized beings behaved. They didn't continue fighting after losing a battle. They didn't turn their civilians into weapons. They didn't make every street corner a potential death trap, but humans did. On every occupied world, the pattern was the same. The military would retreat, and the Council would think they had won. Then the real war would begin. Humans called it guerrilla warfare, and they had been practicing it for thousands of years. What about the convoy attacks? Krenzoth asked, already dreading the answer. Getting worse, Thelnoth said. We've lost 12 supply convoys this month. The humans are using civilian ships modified with weapons. They look exactly like merchant vessels until they open fire. We've started scanning every ship we encounter, but that slows everything down. Our supply lines are stretched thin. The map updated with new information. 3 more transport ships had gone missing somewhere between Council space and the front lines. Just vanished. No distress calls, no debris fields, nothing. Either the humans had a way to capture ships intact, or they had figured out how to completely destroy vessels without leaving any trace. Krenzoth's personal communicator buzzed. It was a priority message from the Council chambers. He opened it and felt his blood run cold as he read. What is it, sir? Thelnoth asked. The Zixtar Collective's primary shipyards have been attacked. Somehow a team of human commandos infiltrated their hive world. They got past all the security, planted explosives in 3 different shipyards, and destroyed them before anyone even knew they were there. That's impossible, Thelnoth said. The Zixtar hive world is 40 light-years behind the front lines. It's one of the most heavily defended locations in Council space. How could humans get there? I don't know, Krenzoth admitted. But they did. The Zixtar are demanding additional protection for all Council industrial centers. They're threatening to withdraw from the war effort if we can't guarantee their safety. This was the real problem. The Council wasn't just fighting humans. They were also fighting to keep the Council itself together. The war was costing more than anyone had predicted. The economy was straining under the weight of military production. Trade routes had been disrupted. Some council species were questioning whether conquering human space was worth the cost. "Sir, there's something else you should know," Thelnoth said quietly. "I've been monitoring human civilian broadcasts. They're not encrypted, they want us to hear them. And they're making jokes, sir. About us, about the war. I had them translated." Thelnoth pulled up several examples on his data pad. Krenzoth read them, and his confusion grew. Humans were turning the war into entertainment. There were videos showing council ships edited to look ridiculous with funny sounds and captions. There were songs mocking the council's tactics. There were even advertisements for war bonds, showing human children contributing their allowance money to the war effort with enthusiasm. "They're not afraid," Krenzoth said slowly. "After 6 months of war, after losing 12 systems, after thousands of their people have died, they're making jokes." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Thelnoth hesitated. "I think, sir, that this is normal for them. I've been studying human history. They fought wars on their homeworld that lasted years, decades, even generations. Wars that killed millions. They learned how to keep fighting even when the odds were impossible. They learned how to make war sustainable." Krenzoth thought about this. The Council fought wars too, but they were clean affairs. Battles in space, victories and defeats, then negotiations and peace treaties. They were almost ritualistic. This was something different. This was total war. A new message arrived, this time from one of the Council's economic advisors. It was a projection of resource consumption if the war continued at its current pace. Krenzoth read it twice, hoping he had misunderstood. He hadn't. "We can't sustain this," he said quietly. "At current rates, we'll bankrupt 3 council species within a year, 5 more within 2 years. The humans are losing more ships than we are, but they're replacing them faster. Their economy is growing while ours shrinks. How is that possible?" "They converted their entire civilization to war production," Thelnoth explained. "Every factory, every resource, everything is directed toward the war effort. It's something called total mobilization. We've never needed to do that before." Another message came in, this one from the Pixan delegation. They were formally requesting a peace negotiation with humanity. They were one of the smaller species on the council, and they had been against the war from the beginning. If they withdrew, others might follow. Krenzoth made a decision. "Open a channel to Ambassador Vasquez. Tell her I wish to discuss a ceasefire." "Sir? The council hasn't authorized—" "I don't care," Krenzoth interrupted. "We're losing this war. Not because we can't win battles, but because we can't win the war itself. Every day we continue, we lose more ships, more resources, more political unity. The humans know this. They're willing to bleed forever because they think time is on their side. And they're right." The connection was established quickly. Ambassador Vasquez appeared on the screen, looking as calm and composed as ever. She was in an office somewhere on Earth, Krenzoth guessed. Behind her, he could see the planet through a window, blue and green and beautiful. "Admiral Krenzoth," she said. "This is unexpected." "I wish to discuss terms," Krenzoth said. "A ceasefire, negotiations." Elena studied him for a long moment. "Terms, Admiral, 6 months ago you told me you would crush us. You threatened my entire species with extinction. Now you want to negotiate?" "Yes. Why should we agree?" "We're winning." "You're not winning," Krenzoth said. "Neither side is winning. We're both bleeding resources and lives for systems that aren't worth the cost." "Then why not withdraw?" Elena asked. "Leave our space, go home. This war can be over tomorrow." "It's not that simple. The Council has invested too much to simply retreat. We need face-saving terms. A compromise." Elena leaned back in her chair. "Admiral, let me tell you something about humans. We don't do compromises when we're defending our homes. You came to our space. You threatened our people. You started this war. And now you want us to help you save face?" "What do you want?" Krenzoth asked. "I want you to broadcast a message," Elena said, "to the entire Council. I want you to tell them that humanity is stronger than you expected. That continuing this war will destroy the Council's economy. That you recommend immediate cessation of hostilities. Can you do that?" "They'll remove me from command." "Probably," Elena agreed. "But you'll save lives. Both ours and yours. Think about it, Admiral. You seem like a good person. You're fighting because the Council told you to, not because you hate us. End this." The transmission ended. Krenzoth sat in silence for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about the soldiers who had died under his command. He thought about the Pixan delegate who had voted against the war. He thought about the human colonel who had smiled while his planet was under attack. Delnoth, he said finally, prepare a transmission to the council. Full broadcast, all official channels. What should I tell them, sir? The truth. The New Order 1 year after the war began, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the doors of the Galactic Council chamber for the third time. But everything was different now. Behind her marched Admiral James Chen in his full-dress uniform, flanked by an honor guard of 12 human soldiers representing each branch of Earth's military. They wore their combat decorations, and several carried visible scars from the war. The chamber was full, more crowded than Elena had ever seen it. Every species had sent additional representatives. Some came to witness humanity's victory, others came hoping to salvage something from the disaster. A few came because they had secretly been helping the humans and wanted to make sure everyone knew it. The Council had formally requested a ceasefire 3 weeks ago, after Admiral Krenzoth's broadcast had shaken the entire galactic community. In that transmission, Krenzoth had admitted the truth. The Council was losing the war, not in terms of battles won or systems captured, but in every way that actually mattered. Their economy was collapsing. Their military was exhausted. Their political unity was fracturing, and humanity showed no signs of giving up. Elena reached the center of the chamber and looked up at the council seats. Many familiar faces were missing. The Korthax Dominion's representation had been reduced by half. Several of the more aggressive species had withdrawn from the council entirely, embarrassed by their failure. But there were also new faces, smaller species that had been quiet before but now wanted their voices heard. Ambassador Vasquez, the speaker called out. It was no longer Krenzoth. He had resigned his position after his broadcast, though Elena had heard he was respected among his people for having the courage to tell the truth. The new speaker was Ambassador Thierine of the Melodic Concordance, the jellyfish-like beings who had always advocated for peace. This council has requested negotiations to end the current conflict, Thierine said, their voice soft but clear. We acknowledge that the war has not proceeded as anticipated. We are prepared to discuss terms. Elena nodded. Before we begin, I want everyone here to understand something. Humanity did not want this war. We offered peaceful coexistence. We followed all established protocols for colonization. We harmed no one. But when you threatened us, we defended ourselves. Now 1 year later, you want peace. So let me be clear about what peace will look like. She activated a holographic display showing a star map. All 32 human systems were marked in blue. First, all human systems remain under human control. Full sovereignty, no oversight, no restrictions. This is non-negotiable. Murmurs spread through the chamber, but no one objected outright. They couldn't. The council had tried to take those systems by force and failed. Second, Elena continued, the council will pay reparations to humanity for the costs of this war. We lost approximately 400 ships, 8,000 military personnel, and over 20,000 civilians in the occupied systems. The economic damage is estimated at 5 trillion credits. We want compensation. Now there were objections. Several species began talking at once about how this was impossible, how the council couldn't afford such payments, how this would bankrupt multiple civilizations. Admiral Chen stepped forward. He didn't say anything, just pulled up a display showing the current positions of the human fleet. They were positioned near 3 different council homeworlds. Not threatening, not attacking, just there. A reminder that the war could continue if necessary. The chamber went quiet. Third, Elena said, humanity will be granted 3 permanent seats on this council, with full voting rights and veto power on any military actions. The days of elder species dictating terms to younger ones are over. That's outrageous, someone shouted from the Zixtar delegation. You can't demand a seat on the council after 1 year of warfare. We can, Elena replied calmly. And we are. Because the alternative is we continue fighting until your civilization collapses. Is that what you want? The Zixtar delegate sat down without responding. But, Elena continued, and her tone softened, these demands come with an offer. Humanity doesn't want to dominate the council. We don't want revenge. We want partnership. We want to help reform this council into something better than what it was. She pulled up a document, hundreds of pages long. This is the new Galactic Charter. It's based on principles that humanity learned over thousands of years of conflict on our own world. Principles about rights, representation, and the rule of law. It establishes that all species, regardless of age or military power, have equal voice in galactic affairs. It prohibits aggressive wars of conquest. It creates mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. It protects the rights of smaller species to exist without fear. She looked around the chamber. I know many of you fought against us, but I also know that some of you never wanted this war. The Pixen voted against the ultimatum. The melodic concordance tried to find a peaceful solution. A dozen other species expressed doubts but were afraid to speak up. This charter is for you. This is your chance to build something better. Ambassador Thurine floated forward. May I speak? Of course, Elena said. I have reviewed this charter, Thurine said. It is comprehensive and fair. More than fair given the circumstances. If humanity wanted to dictate harsh terms, they could. Instead, they offer us a path forward. I move that we vote on adopting this charter immediately. Seconded, called out the Pixen delegate. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. The Korthax Dominion abstained. Too proud to admit they had been wrong, but too practical to continue fighting. The Zixtar voted against it, still bitter about their losses. But the majority voted yes. 42 species out of 47 supported the new Galactic Charter. When the results were announced, something unexpected happened. Several of the smaller species began making sounds of celebration. The Pixen were chattering excitedly. A species of bird-like beings were singing. Even some of the medium-sized species looked relieved. Elena realized what was happening. For these species, this wasn't just about ending a war with humanity. This was about ending centuries of being under the thumb of the elder races. The charter gave them protection, gave them voice, gave them hope. The official ceremony ended, but Elena stayed in the chamber as various delegates came to speak with her. Some wanted to apologize for supporting the war. Others wanted to thank humanity for the charter. A few wanted to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchanges. One conversation stood out. A young Korthax officer approached, looking nervous. Elena recognized him as one of Admiral Krenzoth's staff. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, speaking in hesitant but clear English. I wanted to ask you something, if I may. Of course. My people have been studying human history since the war ended, he said. We learned that humans fought terrible wars against each other. Wars that killed millions, wars that lasted generations. How did your species survive being so violent toward each other? How did you learn to stop? Elena considered the question carefully. We didn't stop being violent, she said honestly. We just learned to channel it differently. We learned that violence sometimes is necessary to defend what matters, but it should never be the first choice. We learned to talk, to negotiate, to compromise, but we also learned to be ready to fight when talking fails. Most importantly, we learned that strength isn't just about how hard you can hit. It's about knowing when to hit and when to extend your hand in peace. The young officer thought about this. Admiral Krenzoth said something similar. He said that humanity won this war not because you were stronger, but because you were wiser about how to use your strength. Your admiral is a smart man, Elena said. I hope he finds peace in his retirement. He teaches now, the officer said. At our military academy, he's training the next generation to think differently about war and peace. Because of you, I think. That evening, Elena met with representatives from a dozen species at a small station bar that had been set up for informal discussions. It was a strange gathering. Aliens of every shape and size drinking various liquids that were safe for their biology, talking and laughing together. A Pixen delegate, a small furry creature barely a meter tall, raised a glass of some blue liquid. A toast, he said in his squeaky voice. To humanity. You kicked our asses, then helped us up and offered to shake hands. That takes real courage. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. Elena raised hers too, filled with actual whiskey from Earth. She had brought a bottle specifically for this occasion. To new friends, she said, and better tomorrows. They drank, and the conversation continued late into the night. Stories were shared. Jokes were made, sometimes at humanity's expense, sometimes at the council's. Plans were discussed for joint scientific missions, cultural exchanges, trade agreements. At one point, Admiral Chen pulled Elena aside. Did you ever think it would end like this? He asked. Which part? Elena replied. The part where we went to war with half the galaxy, or the part where we ended up reforming galactic civilization? Both, honestly. No. When I delivered that first ultimatum, I thought we might actually lose. But I also knew we couldn't back down. Sometimes you have to stand up even when you're not sure you can win. And now, thank you for watching and comment for next part.